podcast with us at Project Control Academy. I'm very excited for today's session because today we are about to embark on an exciting and important topic of risk management, specifically quantitative risk assessment at the program level. Yes, that's a topic we are going to further explore on. And just to give you a bit of insights about today's discussion, as you know, when it comes to the projects, all projects go through some risks, and managing the risk and coming up with quantitative risk assessment at the project level has its own challenges. But when it comes to the portfolio of projects at the program level, the question is, can we still run the QRA quantitative risk assessment at the program level? Can we have a holistic view of the risk and mitigation strategies, not just at the project level, but at the program level? And that's really what the topic of today is all about. It's all about programmatic quantitative risk assessment that we are going to cover in today's discussion. But the question is how this is going to work. We might all know about QRA at the project level and all the tactics and strategies around that. But when it comes to the program QRA, the question is how it's going to work. How can you implement QRA at the program level to proactively mitigate the program risk and coming up with some mitigation strategies for a portfolio of projects? And what are some of the positive impacts of doing the program level QRA? How about some challenges of implementation? How about the implementation itself? What are the steps to implement QRA at the program level? So these are just some of the questions and topics that we are going to explore in today's discussion. It's going to be a very insightful, value-packed session for you, and I'm excited for all of you who are joining us live today. If you are here joining us live, before we dive into the conversation, I want you to please go ahead, introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know who you are, what your role is, and from which country you are tuning in from. I also have a quick favor that I would like to ask you. If you don't mind, hit on the repost or click on the repost so you can share this with your network and others can also join the conversation and benefit from this discussion. If that's the first time you are attending this live broadcast with us, just to give you a bit of housekeeping rules and how it works. First of all, these conversations are going to be casual. We are 60 minutes together with an expert on the topic, discussing different aspects of the topic. You're welcome to ask your questions at any time. We will cover your questions as much as the time allows. So please type in your questions, have them coming throughout the conversation. Also, these sessions are meant to add value to you, to cover an important topic related to project controls or project management, and giving you the opportunity to engage with an expert on the topic and ask some questions and get your burning questions answered. So these sessions are meant for you. Take the advantage of it and use it to your max, and just engage in the conversation. About me, I'm Shorek Orbani. I'm the founder and technical director of Project Control Academy, which is the leading global provider of comprehensive and hands-on online training programs in project controls. And today we have I'm very honored to have a fantastic guest who is going to open up the QRA at the program level for us. He is bringing profound insights and experience on the topic. As the Deputy Director of Risk Engineering at Sound Transit, he has led the quantitative risk assessment for portfolio of rail extension projects. So he really, who can better talk about this topic than the person I have invited today. He is also very passionate about the new and innovative strategies and best practices to improve our project control and program success. So it's really an honor to have Dr. Kamran Hazini joining us in this live broadcast. And please help me give a big warm welcome to Dr. Hazini so we can start the session together. So, Kamran, thank you so much for joining us today. It's really an honor having you in today's discussion, and we are all here to explore the topic of programmatic QRA with you. Before we get started, Kamran, can you share with us? I just very briefly introduce you on your current role, but I know you have a lot of experience in project controls and risk. But tell us how you got involved in risk assessment. Walk us through your journey in quantitative risk assessment or anything else you would like the audience to know about you.
Absolutely. Good morning, Shohre, and thanks for inviting me for this for talking about this topic. And thanks to all who joined this call. Appreciate your time. I'm Kamran Hazini, currently the Deputy Director of Risk Engineering at Sound Transit. And Sound Transit is the Regional Transit Administration in Seattle area. We are expanding and operating transit. That includes the light rail services and bus services to the citizens of the area. We are expanding our services with actually getting double of the length that we had in the past. It's going to open in the next 2 years. My journey as being a project controller goes back all the way to 1998, and then when I started being a project controls specialist, planning and project control specialist, as we call it back then. I started my journey as on working on petrochemical projects and oil and gas. Then I worked in Middle East, in Iran, and then I moved to Canada, in Alberta. I continued my education and also worked in the oil and gas industry in project controls. I've done a bunch of different things. I've been a planner, a scheduler. I've been a cost controller, change coordinator. But what actually, and I think most of us, we are familiar with the organization. Risk assessment is something that is mainly being done by project controls teams. So in addition to my role as a planner, a scheduler, a cost controller, I was also doing the risk assessment. I initially started being more exposed to quantitative risk assessment in 2006, and this is what I've been doing ever since in different organizations. When I joined the agency or Sound Transits, and this is what I really like about this organization is that we have a team solely looking at the risk. So I'm not doing any planning, scheduling, cost controlling. I'm just focusing on the risk assessment, and I'm overseeing this portfolio of multi-billion-dollar projects, both on the rail side and also on the BRT and bus side for the expansion. And I'm doing the risk assessment both on the qualitative and quantitative uh, sides. So I hope that was helpful to know me.
Fantastic. It was. Thank you so much for walking us through your journey, Dr. Hazini. It's really an honor having you here, and we cannot wait to learn from you on your approach to quantitative risk assessment at the program level. Before we dive into the topic, I've noticed we have a lot of engaging audience. If you don't mind, I just want to have quick greeting to whoever is
Absolutely.
joining us. We have Elaine joining us from Hong Kong here. We also have Joseph from Scotland. Welcome, Joseph. We have Dr. Razmary from Saudi Arabia. Welcome. We also have a lot of people from Canada joining us. Razmi is from Calgary joining us. Hazam is from Canada joining us here. Welcome, everyone. So we also have from Chile one joining us from the Contract Management Board. So thank you. So I cannot highlight everyone here, but really we see you and appreciate you for being here. Thank you so much for taking time from your busy schedule for being here to learn and invest in your learning and growth. So hopefully by the end of this 1 hour session, your time is worth it and you've learned something new. That's our goal for you today. But welcome everyone who is joining us here. So to get started on the conversation, Kamran, we would like to open up before we dive into the quantitative risk assessment at the program level. Tell us about your definition of programmatic QRA, what it is, and how it differs from those conventional QRA that we all know about.
Absolutely. So I believe most of us, if not all, we already familiar with the quantitative risk assessment and what it entails in the projects. The challenge that we faced a few years ago, especially that could be the same challenge in other owner organizations or other organizations that actually executing multiple projects at the same time, was that we realized that there are some risks that are impacting more than one projects. For us, the we had 4 ongoing projects that they were heavy in construction. More than 50% construction was done, and now we are preparing to get them ready for completion and opening the service. When we baseline these projects, we staggered the completion dates of these projects, so they give us enough time and allow us enough spacing between the opening, so they don't overlap with each other, because there are certain resources that we are using. The shared resources for testing, commissioning, certifications, or as we call it, rail activation and opening of these projects. These resources are common against these projects. And this is really the only commonality between these projects, because these projects have their own teams, they have their own contractor, they have their own consultants, designers. So they are very minimal, limited technical interdependencies between the projects. The only shared element between these 4 projects is just the resources that we need for certification and activation. So what happened, and regularly we do the QRAs because we have to report to the public. We also do our assessment on the confidence. When can we, by 80% confidence, we can open these projects for service, and also what would be the cost at completion for these projects. Typical QRA. And this is what we have been doing as a minimum. We were doing it at least once a year. And 2 years ago, when we did our assessment, we realized that, wow, because of some of the risks that actually happened, and there was like a combination of different things: COVID, supply chain issues. We had, for those who are familiar with the economy in Seattle or following the news, we had the period of a few months of concrete strike, the concrete mixer drivers strike that impacted all projects. Now, those spacing that we initially planned in between the opening of these projects, they were all almost gone. So these projects started to overlap each other when we were planning to open them in just in a relatively short amount of time. And this actually puts a lot of pressure on those shared resources that we don't have to support all these projects at the same time. And we realized if we wanted to continue looking at the risks in isolation and do just solely the project QRA and looking at projects individually one by one, it's not going to work. We need to have a more programmatic view of the risks, taking a look at all the programmatic risks, how the projects are impacting each other, and then we come up with the mitigations. What projects is going to be first? So the whole idea was, as a result of this programmatic QRA, we come up with a sequence and the timelines of opening for these projects, that we can safely and reliably open these projects for service. So that was the initially what triggered working on a programmatic QRA. I tried. There were different ideas of how we can approach this. Uh, the most of the literature and the papers and researches have been done looking at the QRAs being done on the project level. So we came up with the idea, let's do a programmatic QRA. Let's set up a program risk register. What are the risks that could be common between all these projects? And then we can do these project QRAs, and then we add one layer of program risk on top of those, so it gives us a more holistic view of the risks entailed on these projects, in addition to the program risks. So this was a challenge that we faced, and I believe that maybe other organization can also have the same challenge, especially if you are having multiple projects under execution at the same time.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing the challenges you've gone through, and that's what led you to the programmatic QRA. So, are you saying that this QRA at the program level is for those portfolio of projects that are kind of having some parallel or having it starting at the same time, or having some like some things that is common in between them, or like at what case you just go to the program level to run the QRA? Do you need to have similar type of projects? Like, can you just shed more light on the type of projects that you can just view them at the program level?
So my thinking is when you have a portfolio of the projects, regardless of if they have, well, if they have interdependencies, for example, if we have a schedule or program a schedule that is does have all these projects as sub projects or as projects, well, this can be a project QRA. We are doing the QRA on the overall schedule and on overall cost. In this case, all these projects have their own schedules and being managed independently from each other. My idea is that, or at least it's not only my idea, it's actually what we did as a team, is when our organizations are running multiple projects, there are risks that could impact all these projects. And the project teams, they're trying their best to manage those risks and mitigate those with the tools and resources that they have available for them. When we have a risk that is impacting more than one project in organization, there are opportunities that those risks can be escalated. Those risks can be actually owned by a better or by a party that who can actually better manage those. For example, if we have a risk in the contracts that is impacting more than one project, instead of project managers or project directors finding a way to mitigate that risk, if that can be escalated to maybe a VP or senior VP or deputy CEO or someone in a higher rank in the organization, they may be able to influence better those risks. And so what I'm thinking is that these program risks can be divided into two subcategories. One is the risk, in our case, that was a shared resources that actually initially triggered having the programmatic QRA. The second risks are the risks that are common between these projects. And I see this as a side benefit of doing the programmatic QRA. Once we have a program risk register, then we can move those risks that are programmatic from projects risk registers to the program risk register. And then we can assign those as owners, assign people who can actually manage those risks better in the programmatic level, not in the project level. They may have more ability and more tools and controls in order to mitigate these risks or uh, uh, or avoid the risk. I mean, we have different strategies, these different mitigation strategies or response strategies for each and every risk. So and this is not only for the risk. As a risk team, we're also advocating opportunities. What are the opportunities that we can actually exploit that could benefit all the projects in the portfolio? It doesn't have to be one, it can be four, five, or six or more of those projects. So the whole idea is that we uh, delineate those program risks or opportunities and separate them from the project specific risks. And then when we do the QRA or when we conduct our quantitative risk assessment, we assess the impact of these two layers separately from each other. So then we can see what is the impact of project risks, what is in control of our project directors, our project team, what they can do to mitigate those risks. And on the programmatic side, what are the risks that are adding more time or more cost to the project to get us to the 80% confidence. In this case, we are working mainly on 80% or P80. So what are the things that the programmatic risk owners can help us to increase our confidence, and they can help us manage those risks better? What I wanted to also add is that the programmatic risk register is different from ERM or enterprise risk management. ERM is more on the organization, disciplines, functions, risk to the functions. We are still in the programmatic risk register. We are talking about the risks impacting the projects and the program. So, and I see this because I'm getting that question that, hey, this is it the same thing? But the answer is no. The ERM, enterprise risk management, is different from the programmatic risk register.
So you just talked about the risk register and logging those risks which are impacting the program. Different group of projects that really have an impact on each individual project. How about we're talking about QRA, quantitative risk assessment at the program level? Do you still run QRA at the program level, or you just embed that risk into the QRA analysis for each project?
Very good question. So the way that we are actually we have done, and this year we actually did the second time of this programmatic QRA. So it's still in its infancy. So I'm not saying that this is a very mature process, but what is happening now and what we have seen the good results so far is that we run the QRA, we go to the QRA workshops for each of these individual projects. What we try to make a distinction between the project and program risk when we go to the QRA is that when we in the QRA workshop for the projects, we only talk about the risks that are impacting the projects. Anything that could be programmatic, we wanted to have that discussion in the programmatic QRA workshop. So the what actually we had to do some modifications in our regular process was that, for example, for these 4 projects that I was talking about, one could actually be planned in January, the other one in April, the other one maybe in July, and we realized that this is not going to work. If we want to have a if we want to have a programmatic QRA, then this project QRA also needs to be more coordinated. So and there's not a long or a spacing, a long duration between the projects QRAs and the program QRA. Otherwise, we are going to a programmatic QRA workshop with the data that is 5 or 6 months old. So the difference or the process that we are following now is that for these 4 projects, we want the QRAs to be done back to back. 2 in 1 month and maybe the other 2 in the other month, and then quickly we go to the programmatic QRA workshop. And the idea is that we take the results of all these project QRA analysis that includes the CDF graphs and also the tornado charts, and we take them to the programmatic QRA. We review the program risk register, and we do an assessment on those of the risks on those program risks on these individual projects. Now, the difference is that the program risks may have different impact. Different risks on the program risk register may have different impacts on different projects. For example, the case of the concrete strike. If there is a concrete strike in the region for a few months, the project that is heavy into the concrete pouring may be impacted more than a project that is out of the concrete and a structural work, and now they're moving towards systems and electrical and instrumentation. So that's why during the programmatic QRA workshop, what we do is take a look at these risks one by one in the programmatic risk register, and we do an assessment for each probability, schedule impact, and cost impact for each individual project. And then these program risks will be added to the project QRA model that we built already. So instead of integrating the whole project's schedules or costs into one model, that makes a very huge model, very hard to manage, and also would be almost impossible, really, because we are talking about tens of thousands of activities for each of these projects. Now we want to aggregate all of these. It makes it even harder to do a modeling. So the programmatic QRA workshop gives us, we collect the inputs from the team, from the stakeholders, we do the assessment, and then those program risks will be added to the project QRA model. But this time, the results are showing both the impact of both project risks and program risks. And because we are coding those risks differently, we can easily show in our graphs that, hey, these are the results with just looking at the project risk. Now, if we add program risks, this is the push. We add another 1 month or 2 months or 3 months or whatever that it adds to the duration, or this is the impact on the cost too. The same story. this is the cost, or at P80 with just the project risks. And if we add program risks, this would be the cost, including the program risks. So this is the way that we are doing. But similar to any other QRA, there are round of reviews when we run these either in project level or the program level. We have to go back, meet with the team, review the risk drivers, and see if there are any fine tuning, if there are any risks that are skewing the results, and if we need to do any adjustments or fine tuning the inputs.
Fantastic. You also mentioned, I didn't know you will have a workshop at the program level for running QRA. So may I ask who would be involved in that workshop? Who do you invite at the program level for that QRA, running that QRA?
Yeah, and thanks for the question. That's actually an interesting question. On the project side and project QRA workshop, and I think as most of us know, we mainly meeting with the project team. That could include the contractor, construction contractor, or design consultants, and also the internal team from the organizations, the project management team, project controls, definitely. In the case of the programmatic QRA workshop, it's different. In addition to the program for the project people, we also need some functions from the organization that can oversee the program risks. These can include the people from safety, from procurement and contracts. Could be for us. We have a team that or rail activation. There are subcommittees, 11 subcommittees that are working on commissioning and the startup of these projects. And these people are, they haven't been engaged in the QRAs in the past because we were just looking at the projects. Now we are dealing with the larger group that go to the larger or project or program QRA workshop, and that could be a week-long process. Um, there are some challenges, but the during the programmatic QRA workshop, the idea is that we come up with a detailed agenda so we can categorize all these risks by function. Then we can meet with them. So instead of all of them being around for the whole week, if we need their inputs for just half an hour, so we don't want to really waste their time. We want to be efficient on their time. So we separate and we set aside sessions for each of these functions and subcommittees. So when we meet with them, we say, okay, these are the risks that we have. For example, in operations, that how can we review this together? Can we do an assessment? What do you think if you have, for example, this resource? What would be the probability of that happening? And if that happens, what do you think would be the added time? What is the added cost? So that would be the typical questions that we're asking them. And we need to keep in mind that we are dealing with, and this is a dilemma I think we all of us have, that we are collecting risk inputs from the non-risk experts. And in the case of programmatic QRA, this can be also even it intensifies the same thing, because at least on the project side, we have those folks that are sitting in the QRA workshop for a very long time. But on the function side, for example, operations, for those who are actually actively engaged in day-to-day running and operations of an asset, they are not very familiar even with the QRA workshop. They haven't been even in any QRA workshops in the past. So there are some level of orientation, education, and simplifications too. And we need to make it easy in order to collect the information without going too much deep into the basics of statistics and really theories in the risk management and different types of quantitative risk assessment. Let's be simple and really try to collect the information that we need while we are still keeping the analysis robust and solid, with the solid results.
Very well said. Thank you, Kamran. We have a couple of great questions. If you don't mind, I would like to ask the audience question now
Absolutely.
before we proceed. So the first question is from Sheetal. Very good to see you, Sheetal. And the question is based on the QRA of the various projects. Are the projects prioritized according to any particular sequence? And how is the programmatic risk analysis results communicated to the PMs and PMOs?
Very good question. So yeah, the short answer is yes. Based on the QRA results, then we actually provide a sequence of that the risk profile of this project. For example, project number one is and the 80% confidence that it's resulting in 80% confidence that we can open first within the program, within the portfolio. And then the same thing for the other projects based on the time that the project will be ready and considering the program risk when they can actually be ready to open. So it gives us a sequence of the opening. So what actually I observed in our past two programmatic QRA analyses has been the project risks are telling us when would be the timing of these projects will be ready for opening, or will be or the asset will be out of construction. They will be ready for the testing and a startup. And then the program risks are telling us what would be the duration, what would be the spacing between each of these openings based on the risks. If we have limited resources, for example, from operations, if we are lacking operators, if we don't have the maintenance folks to maintain the facilities once open to service, then it will have some impacts in the duration or when we can publicly open these projects for service. So the project risks really are driving the sequence, but the program risks are really defining the time that is needed between the projects. To answer your second question, that how the PMs and PMO is getting involved, they are actively involved throughout the process. During the project QRA, we actually have the workshop with them. During the programmatic QRA workshop, they also one of the attendees. Instead of bringing all the project teams for the programmatic QRA workshop, we only having a select number of people, like 4 or 5, could be project directors, the deputy construction managers, design managers, and we are only inviting them to the programmatic QRAs so they can also chime in and also interact when we are collecting the information on the program risks.
Fantastic. Great responses, Kamran. We have another challenging question for you, which is a bit long. So, Kamran is asking about he's actually managing a program for 16 related projects. So, his main question is like on the cost side, the cost risk analysis, usually the results are accurate. But when it comes to the schedule risk analysis, that's when the challenge comes, especially with different timeframes and different risks associated with the schedule. So, how has been your experience for the schedule risk analysis at the program level?
So when initially we started this process, we tried different things. One of them that I think can help, that actually helped us, was that for those activities that these shared resources that actually come into play, we came up with a summary a schedule of those activities, and then we resource loaded these schedule, and this was a stochastic schedule based on the we developed a schedule based on P20 results, P40, P60, P80, and P100, and then the resource loading of these resources, and then we ran a Monte Carlo on that to see what are the pinch points that we have. In your case, dealing with the 16 projects and doing have their own schedules, I think the question would be, are there any interdependencies between the projects? If yes, then I would say actually maybe it would be worthwhile taking a look if we can have a QRA on the overall integrated master schedule rather than doing the different QRAs the way that we did it, because our projects are completely independent from each other with no really technical interdependencies between each other except for the shared resources. But if the projects are separate from each other and they don't have really any technical, or they are not feeding each other in terms of the documents, material, data, so in that case then maybe you can replicate what we are doing, although your scale may be larger because we are working on 4 multi-billion-dollar projects. I think you in your case would be 16. That would be probably more challenging. Maybe putting some priorities, or maybe having some mini workshops that instead of going into the workshops and talking about all the 16 projects at the same time, I'm pretty sure that the QRA workshop for each of these projects, or I'm assuming that. On the program side, I think you can actually still do the same assessments. What we did on the cost side, we did exactly the same thing that we did on the schedule. We did the assessment on the direct impact of these risks on the cost. On the schedule side or the cost of the delay, we didn't. We actually isolated them from the inputs that we are getting from the people, because we wanted the risk model, to tell us what would be the cost impact of those scheduled delays. Because every time that the model runs, it generates a new completion date, and based on that completion date, it comes up with a new cost. So when we are asking the question, and something that could be useful when we are asking question from these people, just focus them only to give you the direct cost impact of the risk, and not so much worried about the schedule delays or anything, because then we want the model to do that. I hope that answers your question, but if not, please let me know.
Yes, I'm sure it does. So Kambis has another question. I think you kind of covered that, but about the confidence levels at the program level, what are the standard confidence values, the P values that you used for the program level?
So in our processes, we look at the 80% confidence. We generate the results from P0 to P100. But what we are using as a base for our major decisions by our executives and the board is to look at the 80% confidence level. So that's what we look at. But we also run it in different two scenarios. One is the pre-response or pre-mitigation. The other scenario is post-response or post-mitigation, meaning that for each project, we actually dealing with four different types of outputs. One is the pre-response with just the project risks. The second one is post-response with just project risk. And then the third one would be pre-response projects and program risk, and post-response projects and program risks. So, and these are the results that we are presenting to our executive leadership and say, well, these are the risks. And actually, we are in the middle of the discussions now, because we think that there are still opportunities that we can mitigate some of the risks, both on the project side and the program side. So we are, and that's a part of the iteration process, that we go back to the team and say, well, can we do anything further? Can we mitigate these risks? So instead of, for example, 70%, 4 months of delay, can we take another mitigation actions to reduce either the probability or the impact on cost and the schedule? So, but the short answer is the P80 is the one that we're using in our agency.
Great. Like similar question we have here. You kind of covered, not related to p-values, but in regards to the result of this analysis. So Kamran is asking, how does the delegation of risk from higher levels of an organization, or the escalation of the risk from lower levels, impact the program management, and what strategies can be employed to effectively handle such delegated or escalated risk within a program?
So when we run the programmatic QRA, then we take a look at the tornado charts, and the tornado charts are giving us the priorities of the risks and what is the most impactful risk that is impacting the portfolio of the projects. And this could be different from project to project. Again, some risk may having higher impact on one or two projects, while they may not impacting so much on the other projects. And this is the challenge that the conventional risk registers, or the ways that the conventional risk registers are set up, may not work on the programmatic level, because uh, uh, in most places or in most platforms, the risk scores, which shows the what is the ranking of the risks, is a function of probability, cost impact, and the schedule impact. In the programmatic risk register, we can't, or it would be harder to apply. The reason being is that because now we are dealing with four projects, with four probabilities, with four cost impact, and with four schedule impacts. In, for example, in a question that I think Kambiz asked, that he is dealing with 16 projects, meaning that we will actually have 16 probability, cost, and a schedule, and it makes it less efficient if we wanted to come up uh, with the risk score in the programmatic risk register. I'm not saying that this is not possible, but I think we need to come up with a way that that may be different from the conventional ways of calculating those risk scores and ranking. So for the time being, we are just looking at the tornado charts, and we see what are those program risks that are sitting on top, and then we escalate those, and we give more visibility of those risks to our senior management and senior leaders, and making sure that those are being actively managed and mitigation actions are being taken.
Great. We have a lot of great questions. So if you don't mind, continue with the audience question because they have a lot of great questions here. So
Sure.
another question we have here is, does the program QRA map the program risk to a consolidated program schedule?
Great question. Not on this case. No. What we did, instead of summarizing and come up with a consolidated program schedule, we use a detailed schedule for the project QRAs. We did the assessment of the program risks during the Programmatic QRA workshop, but those risks then got added to the same project model that uses the detailed schedule. That could be an opportunity. I think that could be an idea if we wanted to come up with the consolidated program schedule. But the challenge would be the level of the details that we want to include. Do we want to go based on a level 2 or level 3? The I think that we should actually find a sweet spot that if we don't want to go and do a QRA on a level 6 or level 7, that would be way too much details to assign the risk for. At the same time, we don't want to do a QRA on a level 1 or maybe even level 2, because sometimes when you have, for example, one bar for construction, if you want to load up all the risk on that one bar, it may not give you the accurate results that you're expecting to see when you have actually a critical path or chain of critical activities in construction. So for that reason, instead of using a consolidated program schedule, we decided to use the same detailed schedule that we use for the project QRAs, but this time we added the program risks as well.
Great. We have another great question on mitigation strategies. So, how does the team assess the mitigation measures and the contingency value of a given risk event? The question's from Ahmed.
Sure. So the team, they do an assessment on the on two scenarios: pre-response and post-response. And the pre-response, by definition, meaning that we don't take any particular mitigation or response action on the risks, and we ask them, okay, what do you think are the impact? If this risk happens, then what is the probability? Well, no. First, let me go back. What is the probability of this risk happening? And then they can say, well, I'm thinking that it may be 40, 60%, 40 to 60%. And because we are risk people, we always love ranges, right? So instead of asking for one number, we try to get those inputs as ranges. On the cost impact, well, I start with the schedule impact because the schedule also drives costs. So on the schedule impact, if this risk happens, what do you think that could be added to or the activities may be impacted? And they say, well, it could be 2 to 4 months. And then we also ask about the direct impact of the risks. And we don't want to any inputs sorting the analysis by indirect costs, because those overhead or cost of delay would be, again, we want it to be calculated by the model itself. So we get this information on the pre-response, and we ask the same question. We ask them, what are the mitigation strategies that can be done? Can we maybe, for example, in the case of concrete strike, is there anything that we can do? Can we supply concrete from somewhere else? Can we resequence some of the activities so we can focus on those things that we have at hand and we continue working on those? And then maybe we continue with the concrete pouring for those segments once the concrete is available. And they may say, well, yeah, there may be opportunities. And say, okay, if we do that, how does it reduce the probability of the risk? How does it reduce the schedule impact or the cost impact? And knowing that, and this is important because some believe that the post-mitigated scenario could be an optimistic view of the risks. Pre-mitigated could be a pessimistic view of the risks. So when we actually doing our presentation and showing the results, we don't want to only look at the post response or post mitigated, because there may be some elements of optimism in those results. We don't know if for sure those mitigations actions are going to be realized, or we can see those time savings. At the same time, we don't want to be very pessimistic and say, well, we don't do anything on the risks and we just sit and look them happening. So the pre-response and post-response, maybe the reality would be something in between the pre and post mitigated scenarios. So yeah, I hope that answers the question that you have.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Yeah, there were a lot of questions on how it works. So perhaps my question is the impact of doing this on the projects or the portfolio of projects you've been working on, Kamran. What was what positive outcome you saw as a result of running the QRA at the program level? Can you walk us through some of the benefits of doing that as well?
Sure. So my observation has been that there are some benefits in different aspects. So one is that we see more engagement. Actually, this is someone told me last month that you are bringing people from different corners of the agency to sit in these QRA workshops, so they can actually voice their concerns. They can talk about the risks, and then we can be creative and think what can we do to mitigate those risks. So I can see it's more like all hands on deck, that everybody feel that they have a venue and they have a time to talk about the risk that they're facing, rather than nobody ask any questions from them, and once the time comes they realize that, well, they can't support all these projects at the same time. The other benefits that I've seen, the distinction between the risks that the projects have control and they can influence, and the separating them from the risks that are in the programmatic, and seeking some help and some influence from our executive leadership, that could actually help giving some visibility on some more impactful risks. And just to give an example, a few weeks ago, when we meet with our executive leadership team, I said, well, these program risks, these are something that we can definitely influence. We can help. I can actually pick up the phone. I can talk to some of our jurisdictions. For example, there was a risk about the permitting. And then I can tell them that, hey, if we don't get these done on time, there would be a delay on the delivery of this project. So there are things, when they're messaged up properly, uh, then the senior leadership in the organization can actually influence, and they can help better response to those risks. So I think there are some other benefits too, but at least from my perspective, these are the two major benefits that the programmatic QRA may have.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kamran. We have a question that was also my question I wanted to ask you. Kambiz is asking this question about the frequency of running QRA at the program level. How often do you recommend doing it, and at what stage of the project lifecycle?
Excellent question. So what is the best time to start those? I believe the both project and programmatic QRA should start early. More than one projects that are being executed uh, at the same time, or at least there is an expectation that they may be complete and ready for service in a short amount of time. Then we wanted to be prepared, definitely before the baselining, before we making any commitments to the our organization leaders, or to the public, or to the stakeholders. Uh, we wanted to have that programmatic QRA done, so we make sure that all the impacts of these projects on each other are taken into account when we do our risk assessments. In terms of the frequency, we need to keep in mind that the QRA workshops, especially programmatic QRA workshop, is a long process. It's a process, and it tends to be long. For us, it's a week-long process, and really taking the people away from their day-to-day work for a week, that could be a challenge. We are adopting like an annual cadence for these QRA workshops, but there may be other organization. I know that some of them are adopting like every 6 months on the project side. I personally haven't heard, and I'm interested to know if there are any other organizations who have done any programmatic QRA. But the most organizations are at least doing it at least annually, or some of them doing every 6 months. I know that the LAX, the airport in Los Angeles, they started looking at if they can do more of the QRA workshops, or not the QRA analysis, and they try to move towards like a monthly QRAs, which I think can be done. But the one thing we need to keep in mind is that, and this is what I'm hearing, that when we have more of these workshops, because we are heavily relying on the inputs from the experts, from the people who are actually doing the job, and we need to collect those inputs during these workshops. These workshops, depending on the size and the scale of the project and the complexity, maybe one day, maybe 1 week. So really, someone told me that, well, we need to be careful about the workshop fatigue, because when you're asking these people to sit down in many workshops, then we may lose some interest, or lose some of the enthusiasm to provide some inputs. So something I think we need to trade off. How often do we need to do, and what would the cost of doing more frequent QRAs?
Yeah, bringing the cost into the picture. Whenever we have a topic about QRA, quantitative risk assessment, all of us who are in project controls know the importance of it, because it gives us the contingency, the confidence level for our finish dates and the end point for our cost. So it's definitely beneficial, but not everyone does that. Not everyone can justify the cost. And now we're talking about program level, which is another level on top of the project level. So can you share with us, how did you justify the associated cost, the time that it takes from all the stakeholders to come to that program level workshop for QRA, and all the associated analysis, and then incorporating those analysis into each project level? It's a lot of cost involved, including the time. I'm sure the benefits may exceed that, but how did you justify the associated cost for the top management that allows you to go through the whole thing, first of all?
Right, and I understand this is a challenge. The What I see as risk assessment is another area of the project controls. Why do we do scheduling? Why do we do cost controlling? It's just because we wanted to be proactive. We want to not only look at the back, but also look at the future with the forecasting that we do, and with the prediction, or the risk that may happen and uncertainties that are involved. How can we help our leaders to have higher confidence? Uh, I think if we just wanted to solely frame it as a requirement that we have to do this without providing enough reasons that why we have to do this, I think it may not be successful. I think we need to advocate that, well, we need to do that because when you promise a completion date and completion cost to, for example, the company shareholders, or to the public, or to our board, we want to make sure that you have enough. Our executive leader, we want you to have enough confidence on the number and the dates that you are promising, where that number is coming from. If you're asking just a project director that, hey, what is your assessment of the cost of completion, or what do you think that you can finish this project with this budget, they may say, well, 50%, 60%, but this is really based on just subjective assessment. I may think something today, I may think something tomorrow, next month. This is our human nature. Based on what we see as of today, we may actually change our assessments. And the same thing applies to risk assessment as well. But at least with the risk assessment, we have a process. We have a bottom-up approach that we aggregate all these risk information. We take the schedule, we take the cost worksheet, and we do it in an integrated manner. And this is what I'm really advocating for: is not looking at just the schedule, not looking at the cost, looking at as integrated cost on a schedule QRA, because the schedule drives cost, and we want to have this assessment to do and look at these both in an integrated manner. And once the leadership, they see the results, they see the value of doing that, that should help with at least justifying some of the cost. But I think at the beginning it would be harder, because setting up the processes, becoming more efficient is a key here. How can we become more efficient? For example, can we add schedule IDs in our risk registers. So every time that we want to just to run the QRA, we don't have to go back and ask the same question that we asked last time, that, hey, what activity is impacted by this risk? So if we can over time become more efficient, then the amount of time from the team that would be needed to sit down in this workshop would reduce, and also the amount of time that the workshop that needs to be conducted can also be reduced, and eventually we reduce the cost of these assessments too.
Definitely. And I also believe, Kamran, that conducting the program level QRA needs some maturity level in terms of risk in the organization. I assume at Sound Transit, you already have that matured risk analysis processes and procedures, and everybody is well doing that at the project level. So I think implementing that at the program level is not that hard, but many organizations don't even do that at the project level, or just do that for major projects, not for everything. So in terms of the maturity level of risk analysis in the organization, how much it's essential for this process to even think about.
Right, and this is very important, Shora, to your point. And I'm lucky, and I'm not going to take the credit for this. It's something that the risk processes at this organization has been developed a long time ago, and the team, they have done historically a great job of setting up a team, setting up processes, template procedures, and the plans, standard plans that can be used every time that we have a new project as a requirement. Then it has to go through the QRA workshops. It's not a nice to have. It's a must. When we wanted to go to the board and to baseline the project, it has to pass that PAD check. We need to give the green light that, hey, we think that the baseline budget, proposed budget, and the proposed schedule, it does make sense. It actually falls within the PAD percentile that we are looking at in our risk assessment. So definitely support from the higher up in the organization is very critical to success. But I think we also need, from what we can do, is how we can really work together and help and set up those processes and suggest and provide some propositions or proposals that, hey, this is what we think can, if we don't have it, for example, if we didn't have any risk process, this is what our best practices in the industry shows. This is what AAC said. This is the PMI recommendation. This is what many companies are doing, and these are the results that they are getting. They can actually have more success in getting the project done on time and on budget. And one thing, that I want uh, us to know, that similar to scheduling and cost controlling, the and cost forecasting, the risk assessment is a snapshot in time. So it's like you're taking a frame today. 6 months from now, you're taking another frame. We don't have crystal ball. I wish we had, but we don't. But at least we try our best to get closer to the reality based on what we know now. There's an element of unknown unknowns. 3 4 years ago, who would have included a pandemic risk in the risk registers? No one. And then it hit us, and then we had delays and we had cost overruns because of the pandemic. So it's not that risk assessment is the answer to everything, but this is one of the tools that we have in our belts, in our toolbox, in order to help our organization to make better decisions.
Exactly. Very well said, Kamran. Perhaps the last question we have, based on the time, I didn't even realize how the time flew because it was really heated discussion we had today. Thank you so much, Kamran. So in terms of tools and technologies, is there any different tools and technologies that you have adopted for conducting the program level QRA, or the same tools and technologies apply here? Can you shed more light on the tools and technologies? We also had a question here from the audience related to that. Let me see. It was, I think, bringing the AI into the picture, but that's a different discussion. But if you just tell us more about the tools and technologies in the process, I appreciate it.
Sure. So I look at the tools and technologies in two different points. One is that on the workshop. So when we are facilitating a workshop for programmatic uh, QRA, it would use the same tools and technologies that we use on the project QRAs. Um, we Historically, we go to a room, it's in person, face-to-face workshops. The difference in the programmatic QRA is that this just we have more or larger number of people sitting in those QRA that could range from 50, 60 to even 100 or more. So we need to be more efficient. I personally think that if we wanted to have such a large number of people, in-person meetings may be a little bit challenging for managing the discussions, and maybe using virtual platform, especially after COVID, we see that these virtual platforms are more advanced, and people are becoming more comfortable with those platforms, using the virtual whiteboards, for example, or surveying tools like polls, Microsoft Teams polls. These are the things that help to brainstorm the ideas and direct the discussions. But the primary tools that we are using to facilitate the discussion during the programmatic QRA are still three things: schedules, risk registers, and the cost workbooks. So these are the 2 to 3 main inputs that we use to facilitate the discussion in terms of what virtual or physical platforms that we're using is still going to in-person workshops, or using the virtual like Microsoft Teams or other tools. In terms of the QRA or the assessment itself, the same tools that are being used for quantitative risk assessment can be used. There are many commercial off-the-shelf applications in the market that can be used. What I'm actually, again, I want to emphasize is that use the ones that are doing more integrated cost on the schedule, because that could actually provide more reliable and more integrated results, rather than you can run the schedule risk analysis and then take the risk analysis results and run another cost analysis, but it just adds more time. And every time you change one thing in a schedule, then you have to rerun the cost part of it. It makes it more efficient. Talking about efficiency and reducing the time and cost, the tools that actually can do this both integrated, those actually add more value to the analysis.
Fantastic. Very well said. Kamran, just before we wrap up, for those who are, we saw a lot of interest from the audience who are already involved in a program level and might be thinking of adopting this programmatic QRA. What are some challenges that they might face in case, like just to prep them up based on what you have faced, like if there's any lesson learned that you would like to share as closing comments, I appreciate that.
Sure, yeah. So there are challenges. They're well similar to QRAs. There are some challenges on the programmatic side too. I think the challenges on the programmatic side are even maybe larger, because you're now dealing with a group of people again who haven't been involved in a QRA. They don't know what Monte Carlo is, or what the tornado graph is, or how we are going to use their inputs. So the raising the level of awareness and doing preparation sessions before the actual workshops can actually be helpful to overcome that challenge. So what I suggest is that maybe a few weeks before the actual workshops, arranging an orientation session and say, hey, this is a risk. This is what's gonna happen. This is the kind of question that we will be asking you during the workshop, and this is how we are going to use that. And again, try to keep it simple, very, very simple. And the example that I like the most is just the commuting exercise, just to differentiate between the uncertainty and the risks. If I want to go to the office today, it may take me 20 minutes. The other day may take me 30 minutes. The other day may take me 40 minutes. This is the uncertainty. Don't think about the risks, just the variability of the durations or the cost. But there may be risk. If I go today to the office, I there is a risk, that maybe 40% risk that there is an accident in the road. So if that happens, it adds another 30 minutes to my commute. So really, by using the very simple concept and example, it helps to get better and meaningful inputs from the team. So raising the level of awareness and education on the risk, this is one challenge. The other challenge is that, again, number of people that are involved. And also, the other challenge that may be more important is that different people coming with different agenda. In the programmatic QRA, we have the project folks. Project folks, what is their agenda? They want to get their project done as soon as possible, to finish on time or ahead of a schedule within the budget. What about the operation folks? They want a good, safe, reliable, good quality, and operable asset. So these two are not always going the same direction, because we are hearing that operation, well, I'm not happy with the way or the quality of the work on this station or on this, for example, area of the work. I need this to be redone. But the project, they say, no, based on the quality criteria, these are good, they are meeting the criteria. So we need to be prepared to face some of those conflicts and some of those challenges. And what I suggest is bringing some independent subject matter experts. Could be from other parts of the agency or organization, could be from other companies, just to sit down and just provide their opinion. Or the biases, cognitive biases, as another challenge, and really assigning the role of devil's advocate to someone in the team, in the workshop, saying that, okay, just challenge the inputs, no matter if even if that makes sense to me, and I'm assigning the devil's advocate. I want to ask the question, why do you think that this risk is only 40%? Why isn't it 60%? Or why isn't it 80%? Hasn't it already happened in other projects? Or challenge the inputs on the cost impact, on the schedule impact, because we need to manage the biases. Some project teams are very optimistic, some project teams can be pessimistic. So we need to manage, because the way that the inputs and the way that the team thinks, that could actually skew the results of the QRAs. I hope that helps to frame at least a little bit of the challenges, Shohra.
Yes, indeed. All of your answers are so good. I just want to keep listening to you. The audience had great feedback too. So thank you so very much, Kamran, for your time. We are just right on time right now, so I don't want to take your time and anybody else. Is there any final comments before we adjourn the session, Kamran?
No, I think it was very good question, insightful question. I appreciate that. I hope that I was able to answer the questions you have. But feel free, if you have had or have seen experiences in the programmatic QRA in other organizations, in your companies, I'm very interested, and I would be happy to continue the conversation with you. So you can either add me up in the LinkedIn, and yeah, would be happy to continue conversation with anyone who is interested.
Perfect. Thank you. We will make sure to tag you on this post so everyone who wants to connect with Kamran can really easily connect and really continue the conversation. I also would like to end by an invitation to you, Kamran, and the rest of our audience to join us in our annual conference next year. So I hope everyone can join us for more of these insightful conversations and great discussions, great networking opportunities. So just head to projectsummit.com and we look forward to seeing you there. So thank you again. Thanks, Kamran. Thanks, everyone who joined us today. It was really great questions, great engagement. I really appreciate everyone who joined us live and asking so many great questions. Thank you so much, everyone. A big shout out to you, Kamran, for really sparing time from your busy schedule and sharing these great insights with us. So I really
No problem.
appreciate your time. Thank you
Thank you very
so very
much.
much, Kamran.
That was my honor.
Yeah, we appreciate you. Thank you. The honor was mine. Thank you so much. So with that, I let everyone go. And in 2 weeks, we come back with another insightful presentation. In 2 weeks, we're going to talk about collaborative contracting. So don't miss that out. It's going to be a great session as well. So thank you again, Kamran. We appreciate your time, and a big shout out to everyone who joined us today. Thank you, everyone. See you
Thank
later.
you all. Thank you, Shore.
Thank
Have a
you.
nice day.
Too. Bye.